Oh, okay, great. Hi, Kimmy, welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Kelly and I'm co-hosting with Ivana.
Hi, Kimmy. Thank you for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me. And Kelly and Ivana, I feel like you guys have personally accounted for 99% of my book sales. So thank you very much.
We really like talking about your book. I think everybody here feels the same way. So it's a domino effect. It's just
awesome.
Wonderful.
Yes, I think it's a great book that has broad appeal that you can really pass along to anybody. And so hopefully this little group can just put it into the hands of more people. So we cannot wait to chat with you. We have lots of questions and some that we are kind of delving into here. There's a few questions that a lot of us have had. So Ivana and I are going to start with 2 questions, and then we're going to just shout out some of the group members, and then they can ask questions that they have thought of as well. Ivana, do you want to start with our burning question about the epilogue?
So when I finished the book, I had this question, and then as the questions came in from the group, I realized that I wasn't alone, and people were just wondering about. I understand it's like a fictional story, so I understand that Cooper doesn't really exist in real life, and Finch, right? But when it was told that Scotland had killed them, but in Finch's perspective, then she was able to reunite with the grandparents and go to school and everything. We were just wondering maybe how just the connection of how that happened. Do we just infer that they're going under their alias names still, or, even the relationship between Cooper and his ex-in-laws, how did they just kind of let that go? I know over time, maybe they calmed down a bit. So the questions were just kind of like, how did she go to school, and the driver's license, and just the technicality of,
Yeah. Well, I mean, so when I first wrote the epilogue, which was actually after the book had sold, and so this was when my editor, Sarah, and I were going back and forth about, like, we really want the book to end where it ended, or should we, try to keep on writing. And so I wrote a really, really long epilogue in which all of that was sort of explained. I imagined what would have happened to her. And my editor said, it's too long. We weren't really looking for all of that. So I pared it down, without all of the details. But in the details, I think I had, more information about how that was able to happen. And so it was more a matter of balancing what note do we want to end the book on, and how long can you have an epilogue and not lose readers, or sort of take them off on in a different direction, versus filling in what we just what we need to know to have some sort of satisfaction with regards to, like, what did end up happening to them. Because if the book didn't end, if the book just ended before the epilogue, I think there wasn't as satisfying. There wasn't as much closure. So, I mean, are you asking me what I imagine happened to all of that?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think there was, in that original version, there was a lot more about Marie and her arrival at the cabin and all that she was able to do to sort of usher them into this different era. And I think I wrote this over a year ago, so I'm not exactly sure what was in it, but I think in my head, they must have come to some agreement where Finch would re-enter their lives if the grandparents would be willing to, overlook the charges of kidnapping. And I did look it up, and I think in the state of Pennsylvania, there's a statute of limitations, so that even though Cooper wouldn't have known that, he wouldn't have been able to be charged with those things by the time Finch was, an adult, legal adult. So I think I was sort of acknowledging that all of those things could have been at play, that maybe she wasn't, the statute of limitations was already passed for him to be actually able to at that point. And that the grandparents had sort of come to say, we don't really talk about Cooper. We don't know that you were you're healthy and okay, and we're happy that you're back in our lives, and that they were willing to overlook all the questions.
Good. Our inferring was great. We inferred that, you know, but it's good to hear it from you, because it's just so interesting to see what you thought.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to know, because when we were paring it down, you know, we did want people to be able to have, like, to infer, but not too much. So I'm glad you sort of got there.
Yes. Good job, everybody.
Yes. The next question that I think collectively as a group that we had, and that was my biggest question, is really regarding the ending. And that is what made this book my top book of 2021. The ending was just staggering. I'm a pretty stoic reader, and I was in tears, and that never really happens to me. And so just the emotion that this book, you know, that you were able to draw out of readers, I think was really powerful and will stick with a lot of us. And so I just viewed Scotland's Sacrifice as just this perfect picture of grace. You know, he just really embodied everything that, as a person of faith, that I believe and view. And just the themes of hope and redemption just resonated so deeply with me. And so we were reading in your author's note that this book was something that you had prayerfully considered, and you had, you know, walked through the woods and contemplated some of these things. And I'm just wondering if you could talk about, I guess this is a twofold question, just your writing process and what that looked like, and then how your background and beliefs informed the story.
Okay, so my writing process, I do, and I think I hinted at this with the last question, I do overwrite. I trash and I don't include so much of what I do end up. The final draft looks really different from earlier drafts. I cut a lot, whole chapters and small excerpts, but it ends up being, you know, we'll say in a 70,000 word manuscript, I might cut like or 40,000 or something big. So the writing process for me is sort of just like, I do have to, I don't necessarily know where it will end. But I'll start with something. So in this case, and I have talked about this before, but I wrote a short story about a man and an infant daughter who he kidnapped the girl, and because he felt that the mother was dangerous to her, so he took her off and delivered her to a friend's house. And then he ended up, I think in the story, I think he ends up going to prison and escaping from prison. But so this story, I sent it out widely to lots of literary magazines, and it got rejected like dozens and dozens of times. So, but people would write something nice on it. So I thought, well, it's not right and it's not great yet, but there's something there. So I'm not going to give up on it completely. So and then I kind of realized, like, well, I could revisit that. And what if it's a dad that doesn't drop off the daughter, but takes the daughter with him and stay there. And so once I sort of got to that idea, I was off and running, but I still didn't really know how the book would end. I didn't know when I first was writing about Scotland that he would end up being a good guy. I wasn't sure. I just liked this idea that that there was someone who was watching them and with suspicious intentions that we weren't sure. And so once I got the idea, I end up spending a good bit of time praying for the vision for where the book is supposed to end up and how the book is end up and where the characters are going to go and who they are going to be. And so for me, I spend morning time praying, but I also do sort of pray and think and write in my head as I walk forward. So that is a big part of it. I would probably have a major writer's block if I couldn't see blocks.
Yeah, that's great. I think that really, it just really came through with your ending. To follow up, were there any alternative endings outside of the epilogue that you had played around with, or was this so clear that this just had to be it?
I think once I knew that I wanted Scotland to make a big sacrifice, once I knew that, it was more a matter of ironing it out, number one, because I think a long time ago when my agent was working with me on this book, she said, you know, you have to make that ending believable, and you have to really, readers are not necessarily going, and I think there are still readers who will struggle with that ending. I think that there are people who unfortunately don't know or believe that people with that much goodness in their heart exist. And I think they're gonna, I think those readers will say that's not a believable ending. And my agent, trying to be helpful, I think was trying to point that out to me, you know, like this feels kind of unbelievable, so you have to keep working to make it more believable. But still, I think some readers, it might not, it's still just not going to resonate with them. So once I knew that it was going to end with a big, it was more a matter of ironing it out. And then I did have to loop back and do what I could to make Scotland feel a little, make you feel more angsty around him. Like I wanted to relook at every sentence that he speaks and say, you could read that too late. Like this could be a really nice gesture, or maybe it's really creepy. And I'm not sure. And so I had to go back and work on that.
Yeah, I think you succeeded there. So I'm going to pass this off to some other readers. We're going to start with Laura Beth and your question.
Hi, Kimmy. Thanks for joining. One of the questions I had was, how did you decide on Walt Whitman? Is poetry a big part of your, background from your studies, and because it was quoted throughout, and so I was just wondering where you came to that.
Yeah, poetry is a big part of my background. I did study poetry. Before I started writing fiction, I published poetry, so I did write it, and so read a good bit of it, and I still do try to read it because I think it's good for reminding me to pay, close attention to my sentences. So I like to read poetry still. And when it came to Walt Whitman, I liked the tone of his work as a body, I would say, and I like that he is sort of always tributing the natural world in its glory. So I did like that as a fit, but I also wanted to pick someone classic because I thought Finch is going to have a limited reading at her house. So what might she have on the shelf, and it wasn't going to be Sharon Olds or some, like 1990s or 2000s poet. It was probably going to be someone more classic. So he made sense.
Thank you.
I love that. Amy, did you want to go on and ask a question? Hi, Kimmy. I adored your book, just like everybody here, but I want you to know that I read it as an ARC early on. And then when we found out we were going to get to talk to you, I knew I had to read it again because it had to be fresh in my mind. And I don't know that I didn't love it even more the second time. So
thank you.
It's wonderful. Okay. So I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I kind of want to go back to what Kelly touched on, because that was kind of, she and I had messaged her and we had very similar thoughts on what she was asking. And maybe you've already touched on this, but I'm hoping that this is a little bit further with it. But like she was saying, the themes in the book with grace and hope, I saw Cooper as such a picture of hope, that, what all he had been through, and that he's this broken man, and he's had these mistakes that he's made. And he, he's lived with such despair that he could be a person who just gives up. but instead he pushes through and he fights. And so I saw him as this beautiful picture of hope. And then, of course, Scotland, we've already talked about, and the component of the sacrifice and that picture of grace, of being able to give what isn't deserved. And like you've talked about this a little bit, but I saw him as major themes. And I wanted to know, maybe one, like, is there something you drew on? You mentioned your faith, but is there something like, did you have a picture of a person in your mind you drew from? Or was there some message? Did you want the message to be, or am I pulling too hard here?
No, well, I appreciate all the nice things, and thanks for reading the book twice. That's a great honor. Well, so I try not to set out at the beginning of a novel with a message per se, because I think that can affect too much. Like, I don't want my work to feel didactic or too preachy. It probably already veers on being those things, but I try not to. So I don't necessarily want to have a message, but I did want the book to have themes of hope and redemption. I knew that going in, and I think that is one of the things that I was praying for direction, that I wanted to know, like, what is it that this book is supposed to share with readers, and in what ways can this enlighten readers, or you know, I have John Gardner writes this book, The Art of Fiction, which is sort of a how-to book for young fiction writers. But when I read this book as I was preparing to teach a class a couple years ago, and my book was written by then, but it was not sold when I first read it. But he writes about, on page 201 and 202, he says, if there's good to be said, the writer should remember to say it. If there's bad to be said, he should say it in a way that reflects the truth that though we see the evil, we choose to continue among the living. And he writes on about how at any given moment, a writer needs to keep in mind that someone who is maybe on the brink of suicide, or someone who has just lost someone very dear to them, or someone who is, you know, in the middle of a divorce, those are the people that might pick up your book. And it was very convicting to me to read that, because I always want to be really aware that at any moment, that first of all, it's just an incredible privilege to be someone who's able to publish books, to be in that position, and to be a person who brings, you know, people bring my words into their home and into their lives, and so I want to take that privilege very seriously. And this particular passage was really convicting to me, because I know, like, there is power in the words, and you can completely devastate a person with your words, but you can also, you know, lift them up and breathe hope into them. And so I hope that my work, I am willing to devastate, but I won't leave. I don't want to leave people devastated. I want to bring that element of hope where there is devastation. I mean, we live in an ugly, cruel, broken world, but there is hope, and hope my work can bring that. So, I don't know if that helps, Amy.
Yeah, that's so well said. I'm glad this is being recorded, because when I go back and listen to that portion, that was beautiful. We're going to have Jessica Kamen ask her question next. Let's see. Maybe she stepped out. All right, we'll come back to her. Tammy Teresa Roos. Are you here, Tammy?
Yep. Okay. Not to sound bad, I did have a hard time. So I want to know, I agree. I had a hard time accepting Scotland was going to do that. Like, that was really hard. And there's nothing personal, but I'm an atheist, so I don't have the faith thing to fall back on. So do you take that in, did you think about, like, I know you said you did, so you already kind of answered, but yeah, I had a kind of hard time thinking somebody would be willing to do that much for somebody they really didn't know, that, like, they knew them, but they didn't know them that well. Even people in your life who love you, that can be a hard thing for somebody to make that kind of a sacrifice to do it for someone. So I kind of had a hard time with accepting that. So yeah. Did you take that into consideration a lot while you were writing the book?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a normal response. And I think I did try to anticipate that. And I hope that readers can read that and say, well, no one I know would do that.
Yeah.
You know, but to acknowledge that, you know, that person does exist somewhere, you know, that there are people who are willing to sacrifice, or even for a stranger. And I mean, you do see this in the news headlines and stuff, like a stranger who throws themselves in front of a subway to rescue someone. Like, those people, whether they are people of faith or not, I believe they exist. And so even if Scotland weren't a person of faith, and in this book he is, I want to believe that there are people who have hearts that are that big, I guess, outside of faith.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for your question.
Thanks for sharing your perspective, Tammy. I think that's really helpful and just gives us a bigger picture of how people can, you know, take this ending in this whole book in different ways. All right. Let's go to Amy Geronda. Are you on, Amy?
Hi, everybody. I'm going to try to keep it quiet because my daughter, of course, just started screaming right when Kimi came on. I just want to say that I absolutely adored your novel. I thought it was fantastic. It was also my #1 book of 2021. I've been telling everyone about it. It sucked me in immediately. For me, it was just impossible not to fall in love with the characters. So my main question was, which character for you was your favorite to develop over the course of writing the novel? And if I'm allowed to ask something that just came to my mind. Secondly, Amy kind of was getting on this too in terms of Cooper, the character Cooper, but for me, the relationship between Cooper and Finch, the father-daughter relationship, really struck me because I'm very close to my dad, and just, you know, the love that he has for her is just, there's no words, there's immense. So I didn't know, not to ask you a personal question, but I was just kind of curious in terms of like what inspiration or what inspired you to focus on like a father-daughter relationship. I feel like this particular relationship was so unique and strong, and I just fell in love with their dynamic. And so I kind of wanted to ask you what inspired you to write or focus on that type of relationship.
Well, that's a great question. The first question you asked was about who was my favorite character to write. I don't know if I have an answer to that. I liked writing all of them. It was fun to have a small cast, and I knew with such a small cast that each character would really need to feel real, that there would need to be something, you know, very, I guess, likable, especially for Cooper. I did love writing this in first person from his point of view. I loved getting into the voice. It was just really fun for me to do. My last novel before this, I did third person, multiple points of view, limited multiple points of view. And so it was just a lot harder, and it felt more like work. So this was really fun to just think, like, how would Cooper describe that, and what would Cooper say, and how would Cooper feel when so-and-so did that to him? And so it was really fun to get to do first person. I did have fun with that, but I also loved imagining Finch and Scotland too. I did, so about the father-daughter, I knew that I wanted it to be a father-daughter. I thought about changing it to a woman, changing it to a mother and daughter, and I did. This was early on, and I changed that because, and you know, probably at least some of you are moms, but I felt like for a mom, the decision of whether or not to leave their child and to go in and turn himself in because because the character cared about how the child looked at him. For me, as a mom, I don't think I would have cared. For me, like, okay, kids, you can be mad at me and you can look down on me, but I am not leaving you. It wouldn't have been a choice for me. I would never be able to justify that, I don't think. So once I figured that out, I knew that I couldn't have it be a mom, because that was going to be the central question. I knew kind of early on that I wanted him to have to make sort of a moral, really tough decision. So I knew, like, for me, I couldn't write a mom that would be so convincing. And so it was fun to do the father-daughter thing. I like father-daughter books. I did write about it recently, an essay where I feature some father-daughter books that I like. I really like father-daughter relationships. I have a very good relationship with my dad. He did not steal me and take me into the woods. So just to clarify, that one, that's not autobiographical. But yeah, it was fun. You'll see that the book is dedicated to my dad. So
I'll have to go back and look at that. I also had to say to Kimi real quick, I read your book 3 days after I had my own collision with a deer driving to work on the highway. And luckily I was okay. I live in Long Island in New York, and it was really dark and early, but I read your book like 3 days after it happened, and I couldn't believe like the coincidence, the timing. It was crazy.
Yeah. Oh, that's probably scary. Sorry,
it felt like the right time to read the book. Thank you.
Okay, Brenda, you're up.
My question that I had put in the chat, is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or anything that comes to mind. I just have you down as having a question, so you just fire away.
Okay. Well, to me, it looks so clear at the end. I didn't see it beforehand because like some others had mentioned, I thought Scotland might be made up because he saw people in the diner that were made up. So it wasn't really till the end that you get that assurance that he's real. And to me, he had that kind of Christ image, always kind of watching over you, providing whether you ask for it or not. Finch had that childlike faith. And we've kind of already talked about some of this stuff, but I just wonder how much did any of, like, biblical stuff play into this? Because to me, it looked like such a beautiful picture of that.
Thank you. I did hope that people would see Scotland as, a picture of Christ's love for humankind. I hoped that they would see that in the sacrifice and in the grace of just having to accept something that you don't deserve and you can never earn. So I wanted that, and I'm glad that resonated for you. I don't think I was conscious of making Finch have sort of that childlike faith. If that's what you were hinting at. Finch was definitely influenced by my own kids. The way that they will interact with the natural world and some of the questions that they ask, they sort of made their way into the book. And when I was revising the book, it was sold, but it hadn't. My editor, for instance, I asked my kids, well, what would you, if you saw someone in the woods and they're getting hurt by someone bigger than them, what would you do? We would attack them. We would get sticks. We would charge them. That was their response, that they would immediately want to protect the person at all costs. And so that's another thing that I hope comes through in the book, just this idea that, you know, kids sometimes like, well, a question more than an answer, but are kids more moral than adults sometimes, or do adults just have a much more complicated web that they have to navigate in order to make every decision? So I hope that's a question that readers will wrestle with.
Great. All right, Jessica, you're up.
Thank you. I'm sorry for the wait. I had to run off for a second.
That's okay.
I loved your book, and I'm so happy to be a part of this. I was just curious if you have a favorite spot that you really love to write and get lots of inspiration. Do you go to different places? Do you write at home? Just kind of an idea of what are some of your places that you get inspiration from with writing?
Yeah, I do end up doing most of my writing early in the morning before my kids are up at this desk right here. So this is where I do most of it. Sometimes I haven't really been out a lot since COVID started, but I definitely took the laptop out to write at some coffee shops and stuff. So certain chapters I think were written out, but mostly I just write at home.
From the pictures you've been posting on Instagram, your home looks beautiful, and just so, I don't know, I just like to picture that they're photos like from the book. So it's been so fun to see those.
Yeah. Well, some of them have been just inspirations that I've seen, and you're like, oh, this is kind of where I would picture Finch hiding, you know, in the rocks, and the bear skull. The bear skull I just stole straight out of my own real life.
You did. Okay. Let's see. Annette. Is Annette on?
Yes.
Go for it, Annette.
Hi, thank you. I also really enjoyed your book. It was one of my favorites of the year as well. I stayed up till 3 a.m. to finish it, and I was totally in full tears. So thank you. I have 3 questions. The first was, I was really impressed with the structure of the book. I felt like just the right amount of information came just at the right time, and that both made it unputdownable for me, but it also affected the way I felt about and judged the characters and their actions. I saw this, a really great exploration of the morally gray here, like, the wartime violence versus, the car crash, that's the accident, all the different, him taking the kidnapping, all the different events. And I really am fascinated by how the order in which you learn about facts about a character influences your opinion of a character. And Cooper had a lot of secrets. So I'm curious how you decided the order in which to reveal the information about him, and, whether you hope for that to affect the reader's opinion of Cooper, and also which secret you found the most difficult to justify or the most, wrong.
Yes. That Annette, is that who asked, who's talking? I'm so sorry. I like lost everybody. Everybody froze for a second. So I missed the first part. Can I have you repeat your question? I just caught the very tail end.
I just was curious. I was just curious how you decided on the order of revealing all the secrets, and how you hope that to affect the reader's opinion. And whether there was a secret that you found the most difficult to justify.
Yeah, I think during edits, I did end up adding some additional secrets. I in an early version, Cooper does not actually cause harm to Mrs. Judge, and I don't think he did that in an earlier version. I think I added that in kind of late. So that was I think one element that I wanted us to feel, I wanted readers to feel that he could, at any given time, that he was capable of violence, that he was capable of doing things that he shouldn't do, but that he didn't necessarily always want to do those things. So I didn't, as far as the order, I don't always write in order, and I copy and paste and then also delete a lot. So I don't necessarily know the order that I originally decided as far as which secrets. I think, you know, as I was writing Cooper, as he was coming to life to me, I think I liked that I was having him do these things that even I, or that a reader can say, you know, you shouldn't be doing that, Cooper. But I might do the same thing. And so I needed to walk that line, I think, and it needed to be convincing that he was always, that he had good intentions, but he had a lot of limitations and he has a lot of challenges, and that he was doing his best always to navigate, you know, the world that the hand that he was dealt with. So I don't know if that answered it.
No, that's great. And then my last question was, will you write more books, or are you working on anything currently?
I am. I will write more books, I think. I have a book, actually. I have a full manuscript, but it's not right yet. And something is wrong with it, and I'm not fully sure how to fix it. So I still have to keep working on that. I have some friends who read it and given me some feedback. But I just sort of set that on the back burner for a little bit. And then just started a brand new book. It's sort of fun to start with. This is a fun part of writing, where it's like the whole world is wide open and I can kind of take it where I want to take it, and the characters will sort of reveal themselves to me and the story will unfold as I write. The revising and all that ends up feeling more like work, but
this maybe is a good segue. In our discussion, we were talking about how the book is classified as a genre, and on the publisher's website it's classified as a thriller. And we were talking about, we were like, oh, I don't know if we felt that way. We decided was Laura Beth, was it, did you say character suspense was, I think, kind of what we landed on. As a genre, we just made that up, but we're just curious, like, what you perceive the book genre to be, and your current like works that you're working on. Do you feel like they fall in the same genre, or are they something different?
Yeah, you're definitely not the first person to say that about the book not being so much a thriller. So, you know, I wrote this book. I wouldn't have personally characterized it as a thriller. I think it was pitched as upmarket or maybe literary suspense, which I feel very comfortable with that description. But you know, once you do sell the book, that you sort of trust that the people who study this and specialists in all of the categorization and that kind of thing are going to get the book into the right hands. So I wouldn't have defined it as a thriller. And I will say that Minotaur has been wonderful, and I've loved my everybody who I've worked with at that press, and they've all been phenomenal. So no complaints at all.
All right. Wendy, she kind of covered your question about what might be next for her. Did you have another question you'd like to ask?
I'm just excited there's another one coming. I actually, while I'm sitting here, ordered Fallen Mountains because I think I've seen somebody post that they'd already read that one. The best thing I think about this book was that I can recommend this book to anyone. There's like not anything in this book that, you know, there's so many different people that I talk to that say, hey, you know, tell me a good book I should read. And this one just has everything. I feel like literally any person that I come across, I can say, you need to read this book. There's going to be something in this book for you. And that was one of the best things. I just loved it because of that, because there's not a lot of books out there these days that you can do that with. There's going to be something that's going to, keep you from thinking it's for another person, but this one is just great. And so I'm looking forward to reading more for sure. So I'm glad to hear you have something in the works too.
Yeah, thank you, Wendy. That's really kind of you. Yeah, I think the book that I just started, that I'm 10 pages in, and those 10 pages might get thrown in the trash. I mean, that's where we're at. But it would also be literary suspense. That was the previous question.
Yeah,
I did gift this book to my kids' teachers also, because like Wendy said, I felt like it's good for anybody, even if you don't know their taste, and genres. So
yeah, I really like books that bend genres. I'm usually not a straight mystery reader, or so I like books that sort of straddle a couple genres. So I'm happy to be living in that space.
I had a question. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just curious, Kimi. I'm addicted to book subscription boxes. I'll totally admit that. I have a problem with them. Did you get notified that Authentic Book Boxes actually picked your book to be in their book box? Like, did they tell you? Did that excite? Like, were you happy when you found that out? Like, did you find that kind of fun knowing that they picked your book to be in one?
Oh yes, I was so excited. I want an Authentic Book Box with my book in it. I hope I get one. It looks so cool and so fun. So yeah, I was really excited to be a selection for that.
Kimi, many of us are wondering if you have any authors that you gravitate towards, or like any favorite books of 2021, or just book recommendations in general. We would love to hear it, or what you're reading now.
Yeah, I'm reading Cloud Cuckoo Land right now. And for me, Anthony Doerr is one of the few writers that I will just hands down say I would read anything that he wrote, because even if it doesn't sound like a book that I would like, I'm sure that I will learn something and enjoy the journey of the book. So that's what I'm reading right now. And it's so long, and I'm not that fast of a reader. So I have this really nasty habit of like sitting down to read, and my kids will inevitably need something as soon as I sit down. So and I say, oh, I got a paragraph, because that's usually what it is. Like one paragraph. Oh, and then they go, how much did you get, Mom? And I'm like, 2 paragraphs. So it's like a joke among us. So yeah, so that's what I'm reading right now. And I think I'm about halfway through it. My favorite book of 2021 was Wrapped with Stars by Andrew J. Graff. I really loved that book. I felt like it's similar to what I'm sorry, I'm looking at the face to recognize it. Someone said that they felt like they could give it to anyone. Was that you, Wendy? That you felt like you could give it to anyone, including like a young nephew, because the content was clean enough that I wouldn't feel, awkward about giving it to my 14-year-old nephew. But the adventure story was great. The writing's beautiful. I love the setting and the nature. I loved the characters. I was rooting for all of them. So that was my favorite book of 2021. I did also really like Peter Heller's The Guide, but that comes with caveats. That it's not for sensitive. None of his books that I've read are for sensitive. But I do really love the way he writes.
That's great. I've read both of those too, and I can see from your writing why you would be drawn to those types of books. That's, they're just nature-based and such a connection with the, just the natural world. I love that. Brittany had a question about the audiobook.
Hello. My question was, what part do you play in choosing the narrator for the audiobook? I solely listened to it, and is so atmospheric, and I just thought that he was the perfect narrator. It was definitely in the top audiobooks that I listened to this year, because it was just so well done, and I was curious what part you play in that.
So I've written 3 books. The first one I was not consulted at all on the audiobook. So I had I don't even know if I knew that they were making an audiobook. So I didn't have that one. But that one was especially weird because it's like a memoir. And so it was my story. And so that was, I just couldn't listen to it, honestly. But I probably shouldn't be saying that on a recorded Zoom. Sorry. But so we did audition a number of people for These Silent Woods. And so my vote was for Bronson Pinchot, who was selected. Macmillan was really nice about letting me weigh in on who I liked. We also requested pretty early on that a woman would read the epilogue, and they also accommodated that. I'm glad to know that you felt like you did a good job.
Yeah, it was so great. Thank you.
Lisa, you had a comment about the cover. Did you have a question with that as well? She just said in the comments that the cover was gorgeous, and I agree. I know that you talked with Cindy from Thoughts on a Page in that podcast episode just about the cover and the cover design. So I sent that interview out to our group chat, so people can check that out too. Tracy, I'm not sure if Tracy is on here, but she had a great question. Tracy, if you're on here, speak up. Otherwise, I'm going to steal it and ask. Okay, I don't see her. Tracy submitted a question, and she's wondering if you ever considered writing the book with alternating perspectives. Just only in the last chapter, we hear Finch's voice, and she really liked her voice in that dialogue. And she's just curious if you toyed with using it in other parts of the book.
I didn't. And honestly, that epilogue was a decision. Writing the epilogue, I wrote that late in the game because I really, I think for one thing, I had published another book that was written from the view in 2019, and so I was jumping into this, and it felt so refreshing and enjoyable to write first person and to get really deeply into the voice. And so I really just stuck with that. I wanted, I think I would stick with that decision if I were going to rewrite. There are things that I'll think, oh, I wish I would have done that, or I shouldn't have switched those chapters around, about things. But I do like that it is very voice driven, and in so many ways, it really felt like Cooper's story. And I think Finch comes to life because we see Finch through Cooper's eyes. And so, I liked the idea that this is one person's story about the decisions that he made and the regrets that he has and the consequences of those. I didn't really think about writing much else.
That's interesting. I love to hear your thoughts behind that. I think Laura Beth, do you have another question?
You pretty much covered it asking about the genres, but as a parent, I know that where I got the suspense more than the thriller is that as a parent, sometimes you picture every horrible thing that can happen to your child. And that happens when Finch disappears, and all the things in his brain that can happen that can hurt their situation. And for me, when I'm thinking at an indie bookstore where your book should be on which table, it was hard for me to decide. And we had this whole discussion prior to you getting on here, but it was, that's where the suspense came for me, was as a parent, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And then I'm thinking the alternative, well, he put them in this situation, right? And so that's where that line that you talked about, that was so narrow because, should she be living with no friends and only, dreaming about this wood nymph? But, it was very suspenseful in that situation for me.
Yeah, I liked, I think Cooper is wrestling with those questions of like, am I doing this right? This is all a terrible mistake, and is my daughter paying the real price for my decisions? I think that as a parent, those are questions that I ask myself, you know, like, are we doing this right? It's just, no matter how perfect, you know, your life can be, how careful you are about orchestrating this, you know, ideal childhood for your kid, like ultimately things can go wrong, and maybe you're probably making lots of mistakes along the way, you know, and not like the kind of mistakes that Cooper has made, but I think just that daily journey, you know, we all are making choices and hoping that they're right.
Yeah, I think that's something that, you know, all parents can resonate with, is just that like concern. And, you know, you go to bed at night and you're just thinking like, oh, am I doing the right thing? And I think that, yeah, a lot of people really connected with that. Amy, if you're willing, I would love for you to ask your question about your husband, who's the veteran, and your experience with reading the book, if you're willing to talk about that.
I keep forgetting I'm muted. Yeah, you touched on Cooper's character a little while ago, but and I forget exactly what you said, but there was something you said that I was like, yes, and it was so obvious to me that you wrote with such purpose with him, because my husband was in the military, and he is now he's now out, but he was in the military. And when I was reading what you would say, like when we were in Cooper's head and he was going through that cost benefit analysis, right? Like this is what I had to do. And I hate that I had to do this, but yet I was in a situation where duty demanded it, right? Like, and then the way he grappled with the choices that he had to make and the situations he had to be in, and how he kept thinking through, like, I'm a flawed person, but yet I did what was demanded of me. And I think that is such a perfect picture of what I've seen both my husband go through and other, you know, because we were in the military for a long time, the military community. And I've just heard that so clearly through my husband and others that have served alongside of him. And it seemed, it felt personal to you too. And I mean, you know, obviously we've raved about the book. We think that you're obviously one of our favorites, right? But I mean, so maybe it's the trick of a good author, but it felt personal to you too. And so I guess I was wondering, was it really good research, or do you know somebody who's walked those steps and that, you know, if you've seen it firsthand? Because I've seen it firsthand and it was so well portrayed.
Well, thank you, Amy. I think there are probably 3 different components at play. My dad is a vet, so I wanted, it was very important to me to make sure that I treated that experience with reverence, I guess. Didn't want to, I needed to make it feel very authentic, and that was really important to me, to make sure that I did a good job of capturing that. And to do that, I did do some research specifically about PTSD and panic attacks. I didn't know a lot about that. My dad did not have those things, and so I didn't experience that firsthand, but I wanted to know more about it. So I did have to do some reading on that. Lastly, I had a friend of my husband's did serve in special forces in the Middle East. And so I had him read the chapters where Cooper is writing about his time in combat and what it was like coming back. And he was able to say, largely as it was, he was pretty supportive. There were times when he said, no, the word is anxiety. That's the word that you need to use here. It was anxiety that I felt going out and hearing a door slam or whatever. Anxiety just infiltrated every aspect of my life until I had to move back to it and move things like that. So yeah, it was a mix. And also I it's a blessing and a curse, but I feel like just knowing that the people that I do know who have experienced that and feeling that empathy, like feeling like I could hear what it would be like and trying to that. I don't really know what it's like, but I can getting that as well.
Well, it came across very clearly and it was very reverent. So from somebody who has been in the military community and has seen it firsthand, I can't imagine it being done better.
Thanks.
Kimi, I was just going to say I'm a therapist that works with veterans with PTSD, and I 100% agree with Amy. You did it so well. I just assumed you had someone very close to you that had PTSD from military experience. So whatever research you did paid off.
Well, thank you, Carissa. I appreciate that.
Great. Well, thank you for everybody for sharing your questions. And Kimi, thank you so much for chatting with us. We had the best time and we're just so thankful for your book and your just willingness to meet with us and chat. Would you mind if we took a little picture screenshot with our books?
Sure. Do you want me to put mine?
Yeah, if you got it, sure.
All right.
I'm gonna do the screenshot, but there's two screens, so I'm gonna do I don't see everybody.
Oh, we got like a 2-screen situation. That's okay.
Good. That's a good thing.
Yeah, we'll just do like part 1, part 2. Okay.
I think mine is on one screen if you want me to snag it.
Sure.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be great. Are you gonna? Yeah. Then I'll just let go. You just tell us when.
All right, I'll do a quick countdown, and when let me find the right button. There it is. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. All right, let me see if that worked. I think it did it.
Thank you, Kirsten, our resident screenshotter. She's always coming through.
I think I have it.
Right.
Awesome.
Great.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was really fun to get to talk to everybody. And I recognize lots of your handles. Is that the right term?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I recognize lots of you and I really appreciate all the support that you've given me on Instagram. And so thank you so much. I wasn't on Instagram and my publisher was like, why don't you try it? So I did, but you've all been really wonderful and lovely. So thank you so much.
We're very lucky that you joined us, and thanks for entertaining us with this amazing favorite from everybody.
Okay, hold on. It messed up. We got to redo it.
Oh boy.
Oh my gosh, good to know.
Just in time.
Sorry.
That's okay.
All right. 1, everybody ready? Okay, 1, 2, 3. All right. There we go. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll send the picture out to everybody too then, once we get it from you.
Yes.
Sounds good. Thank you everybody for joining, and thank you again, Kimi. We so
Thanks
appreciate
again.
it. Best of luck
Thank
with
you
all
so
of it.
much.
Thank
you, ladies.
Thank you.
Nice meeting everybody.
Bye.
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 Yay.
Oh my gosh, that's so great.
We kept it to an hour.
I know. I was like, that was good. I was like, I kept thinking about you. I'm like, how are you doing? I just,
No.
I would be like, yeah, you're great.
It was good. Yeah. No, that was so good. She was
Awesome.
Yeah. So I'm so curious. Like, I wish she would have told us more about what she's working on. I didn't want to push it, but
I know it sounds like she's just like not quite there yet. Right. Like it's just
a big. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, that was so fun. What a big group. That was such a big group.
I know. I don't know how many people ended up like in the room because it was, am I recording still? Oh yeah. Okay. I'll stop that.